So in the previous sessions, we talked about Docker networks, right? So today we'll understand a very basic example of using environment variables in bridge networks. And then we will talk about load balancing with Docker networks. Okay. So let's say I have two different microservices, running inside Docker host. Okay. So like one is, you can say to do and the other is database, or you can say, so there is this database running and I wanted to, test the connectivity to it by creating another container like DB tester. Okay. So how do you connect to this database? Okay. So we know that using default bridge network, we should only use the DB containers IP address, right? DB tester has to use this MySQL databases containers, IP address and port number to connect. Okay. So we also understood the, issue with default networks. So there is no DNS resolution using container names. Okay. So for example, so let's say, I wanted to create this MySQL container. Okay. So if you go to Docker Hub and search for MySQL, so you're going to get this, Docker run command. So we are actually running it in the daemon mode by the name MySQL. Okay. And, this is the Docker image and MySQL runs on 3306 internally. So we are exposing 3306. Okay. And we should also pass some environment variables like what is the root password that you have to use and the database you wanted to create. So this is the command that we have to run in order to create that MySQL container. Okay, so this is the MySQL container running. Okay, so how do I find the IP address? So inspect the container. The name of the container is MySQL. Okay, and 170.17.0.2. So this is my IP address of the container. Okay. So now I have another application that I have written. Okay. So that is known as DB tester. So this DB tester can connect to any database and then it can check the connectivity. Okay. Okay. But when you run that particular image as a container, you need to pass where exactly your database is running, the username, the password, and the database to a table to connect to, database to connect to. So this is the IP address of the host and this is the database. Okay. So if you see, I'm giving that information of the DB host, in the form of an IP address. Okay. And username is, by default root and the password is my secret because when I created this MySQL container, I gave this particular password and the database that I created is test. So I'm connecting with the same information, but the host here is hard coded. So I hard coded to MySQL container. Okay. So let's try to run this. And also I'm running -rm because this particular container will run and immediately it gets exited because it will just test the connection and it will leave. It will exit. Okay. So that's the reason I used -rm. So it gets auto removed. Okay, you can see it says checking DB connection, database connection is successful. Okay, so in case if you're using any wrong IP address, or let's say MySQL container got restarted and its IP address changed somehow. Okay, so if you try to give a wrong host or information to this particular tester, basically it will say that checking DB connection can't connect to MySQL server on that IP address. Okay. So the problem with this particular Docker run statement is here we have hard coded the IP address. Okay. So what if I have to, use container name? Let's say the container name here is MySQL. So if I simply use MySQL here, will it run? Let's say instead of this, if I use MySQL, so will it run? Okay. It still says that the host MySQL is not known because there is no DNS resolution in the default network, bridge network. Okay.
Yeah,
Any questions?
what is this DB connector image? Is this your own?
Yeah, it's my own image. I'll also show the source code when we talk about Docker files. So what it does is it is going to check the connectivity, uh, you know, to this host with these credentials. That's it.
And
Okay.
you said -ts running in the daemon mode, right? I thought it is a detached mode. What is the
Same.
same? Okay,
Same.
same.
Detached daemon. I use interchangeably, but both are same.
Okay.
Detached daemon.
Mm,
Because it's a background mode. That's what I'm
mm,
trying to say.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now what I can do is basically I will create a network. So let's say Docker network create, the name of the network is test network. Okay. Then I'll try to place, both the containers inside the same uh, test network. Okay. So let me create the DB first. Okay, because I deleted the previous container. I'm trying to create the same container uh, under a different network. Okay. Okay, I created that network, and then I'll put this container into it. Okay, so there is already a container running with the same name. So let me remove it. Okay, and then put the container in the other network. Then, so when you start any other container in the same network, okay, you can talk to other containers in that network using their container name. So here MySQL is nothing but the name of the database container. So any container in that network can talk to other container using its name. Okay, so that is known as DNS resolution. Okay, you can see it says database connected successfully because there is a container MySQL in that network. Okay, got it? So there is no hard coded value here in terms of um, you know talking about DB host, that is database host. Okay. Any questions, guys? Yes, any questions?
And these environment values are fixed in the
Yeah.
command,
So once you start a container with these values, so basically these are fixed.
and these are used by the container connector, right?
So this MySQL container has these environment variables for its configuration. Similarly, this DB connector uses these environment variables for its configuration. So internally, it is reading this data. Okay, if you see this is a source code. Okay, see I'm reading all these environment variables, and when I'm trying to connect to a database, you can see here I'm using all these. Since this connection requires this data, instead of providing them as files or hard coding them within this program, so I made them configurable through environment variables.
Internally, Docker file is doing this, right?
No, Dockerfile is not doing it. Yes, I mean, Dockerfile is actually building this.
Building this
Okay,
with the
I
environment
think it will
variables.
be much clear, once we complete Docker files. But the thing is, Docker files, have changed a lot from last time. So we have plenty of new concepts. Okay. So the way the Docker files are built is also changed. Okay. So Docker has come up with many latest features like build kit, okay, build view. So there are a lot of new concepts. Even in fact, you can build your containers on a remote machine, okay, in a Kubernetes pod. So Docker has its own build cloud where instead of you running your builds locally, you can run builds remotely on Docker host. Okay, so that requires subscription to the Docker build cloud, but there is also a free plan. So there are a lot of things that have changed from last year. So I ideally, the Dockerfile sessions I used to take for a couple of days, but this time I think it will take 4 days to complete because of that extra features. So that Docker has introduced. So the way Docker files are built, the service that built is also changed inside internal to the Docker.